Everyone knows Tyrannosaurus rex, not just as a dinosaur, but as the dinosaur, the final boss of prehistory, the living embodiment of brute force, bone-crushing jaws, and evolutionary excess. If you asked a room full of people to name a single prehistoric animal, this is the one most of them would land on without hesitation. For more than a century, T. rex has reigned uncontested as the apex predator of late Cretaceous North America. Bigger than its rivals, heavier than its contemporaries, the undisputed king of Laramidia. End of story. Except, maybe not. What if Tyrannosaurus rex wasn't a single species at all? What if the animal we've built museums, documentaries, and pop culture empires around is actually a grab bag of multiple tyrants, quietly lumped together under one famous name? And what if, this is the part that really stings, Rex itself wasn't even the biggest of them? That idea isn't coming from a Reddit thread or a speculative YouTube comment. It comes from a published scientific paper by one of the most influential and controversial figures in modern dinosaur paleontology. Before we go any further, if you enjoy deep dive science breakdowns that separate evidence from hype, consider subscribing. These kinds of debates are where paleontology gets genuinely interesting. Because today we're talking about the proposal that Tyrannosaurus imperator, the tyrant lizard emperor, may have existed, and that the king might not have been the ruler we thought it was. Everyone knows Tyrannosaurus rex, not just as a dinosaur, but as the dinosaur. It is the symbol of raw power from the ancient world. Huge teeth, massive jaws, and a reputation as the ultimate predator. When people think of dinosaurs, T. rex is almost always the first one that comes to mind. For a long time, the story seemed simple. Tyrannosaurus rex lived in western North America near the end of the age of dinosaurs. It was the biggest, strongest meat eater around. Nothing challenged it. It ruled its world. But what if that story is wrong? What if T. rex was not just one species, but several different ones that scientists accidentally grouped together? And what if the dinosaur we call Rex, the king, was not even the largest of them? This idea is not coming from a random internet theory. It comes from a real scientific paper written by a well-known paleontologist. The claim is bold, controversial, and has caused a lot of debate among dinosaur experts. Before we dive in, if you like clear, honest science discussions that explain both sides of an argument, consider subscribing to the channel. To understand why this idea caused so much debate, we first need to talk about the scientist who proposed it. The paper was written by Gregory S. Paul, a paleontologist and paleoartist who has been working in dinosaur science for decades. He is well known for creating detailed dinosaur skeleton drawings and for helping shape how dinosaurs are reconstructed in books, museums, and documentaries. Many scientists today grew up seeing his work, so this is not someone new to the field or looking for attention. Paul has a long history of publishing research and challenging old ideas. But with that reputation also comes controversy. He is known for making bold claims, and not everyone agrees with his methods. Back in 2022, Paul published a paper arguing that Tyrannosaurus rex should be split into 3 different species, not just one. This idea was strongly rejected by many tyrannosaur experts. Some criticized the evidence. Others felt the methods were not strong enough. The paper quickly became a target of debate and was mostly dismissed. But Paul did not back down. A few years later, he returned with a new and even bigger paper. Not only did he repeat the claim about multiple Tyrannosaurus species, but he also suggested that several smaller tyrannosaur relatives lived alongside them. Whether you agree with him or not, one thing is clear. This is an argument coming from experience, and it demands a closer look. So what exactly is being proposed here? Gregory Paul argues that the dinosaur we call Tyrannosaurus rex is actually 3 separate species, not one. According to his idea, these animals looked similar at first glance, but had real physical differences that matter scientifically. The first species is Tyrannosaurus imperator, which means tyrant lizard emperor. This one is said to be the earliest and most heavily built of the 3. Its bones are thicker, its skull is wider, and its body is more muscular. Famous large fossils like Sue and Samson are placed into this group. Next is Tyrannosaurus rex, the original king. In this model, Rex comes later in time and is slightly less bulky. It still grows enormous, but its skeleton is more lightly built compared to Imperator. The third proposed species is Tyrannosaurus regina, or tyrant lizard queen. This one is described as the most slender and lightly built. Some well-known fossils like Stan and Black Beauty are assigned to this group. Paul argues that these three types lived at different times or alongside each other, and that their differences are not random. If he's right, this would completely change how we think about the largest meat-eating dinosaurs ever. But bold claims like this only matter if the evidence truly holds up. And that's where things start to get complicated. To support splitting Tyrannosaurus into three species, Paul points to differences in bone strength and shape. One of his main ideas is robustness, how thick and heavy the bones are, especially the skull and thigh bone, called the femur. According to the paper, Tyrannosaurus imperator has the thickest, strongest bones. Rex falls in the middle, and Regina is the most lightly built. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. Different species often do have different body builds. The problem is how these differences are measured. Some of the fossils used in these groups are fully grown adults, while others are younger individuals that were still growing. That alone makes it risky to compare bone thickness, because younger animals are naturally less robust. On top of that, the paper does not clearly explain how the femur measurements were taken. Measuring a bone at different points can change the result a lot. There is also very little information about bone circumference, which is important for judging how strong or heavy an animal really was. Without that data, claims about robustness become much weaker. Paul also argues that these species can be separated by age in the rock layers they come from. He suggests that the heavier forms appear earlier in time, and the lighter ones appear later. But the rock layers involved are complex and often debated. Many paleontologists argue that this timeline is far from clear. None of this means Paul is definitely wrong. There may be a real trend toward lighter builds over time, but right now, the evidence does not clearly draw clean lines between three separate species. And unfortunately for the tyrant lizard emperor, the next set of arguments raises even more questions. Another major piece of evidence in the paper focuses on small bumps of bone above the eyes, called post-orbital bosses. These structures may have been used for display, like horns or crests in other animals. Paul argues that each proposed species has its own boss shape. Imperator is said to have long, low bumps. Rex is supposed to have tall, round knobs. Regina is described as having smaller, flatter shapes. The issue is consistency. In the paper, these boss shapes are often described using words like sometimes or often. Some specimens don't match the pattern at all. Even worse, the original T-Rex fossil does not preserve this part of the skull, so it cannot be used to define the species. When scientists name new species, they usually rely on clear, measurable traits that can be tested again by others. But in this case, the method is mostly visual. Paul openly states that if two fossils look different enough, they probably are different species. In simple terms, the method comes down to expert judgment, using the human eye and experience. That approach can be useful, but it is also very subjective. Two scientists can look at the same fossil and see different things. The paper also mentions tooth patterns and suggests they help separate the species, but tooth position can vary even within the same animal, making this a weak argument on its own. To be fair, Paul does suggest an interesting idea. The larger bosses may belong to males, used for display. It's a fun thought, and it may inspire future research or artwork. Still, when major species splits, rely this heavily on what looks right, while skepticism is hard to avoid. The paper does not stop at splitting Tyrannosaurus into three species. It also argues that smaller tyrannosaur relatives lived alongside these giants at the same time. One of the most debated examples is Nanotyrannus. Paul supports the idea that it was a real, separate dinosaur, not just a young T-Rex. He points to several traits, including a higher number of teeth, longer arms compared to body size, and differences in the leg bones. Some of these points are worth discussing. Recent studies suggest that certain features do not change much as an animal grows. If those features are truly different in Nanotyrannus, that could mean it was its own species. This is one area where Paul's argument has gained some support. Another proposed dinosaur is Stygivanator, which many scientists think is simply a juvenile T-Rex with unusual bone growth. Bringing it back as a separate species is risky, and most experts remain unconvinced. What's important here is balance. Not every idea in the paper is equally weak or strong. Some claims may turn out to be wrong, others may survive future testing. But piling many controversial ideas into one study makes the entire argument harder to accept. And that brings us to the final question. What should we actually take away from all this? The idea of Tyrannosaurus imperator is exciting. The name alone sounds powerful, and the thought of an even bigger, bulkier tyrant than T-Rex is hard not to like. If it were real, it would likely be the largest meat-eating dinosaur on average. But excitement is not evidence. Right now, the case for splitting Tyrannosaurus into 3 species is simply not strong enough. The differences used to separate them are unclear, hard to measure, and often inconsistent. Most of the variation can be explained by age, individual differences, or natural diversity within one species. That does not mean the discussion is useless. Science moves forward by testing bold ideas even when they fail. This debate pushes researchers to re-examine fossils more carefully. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think multiple Tyrannosaurus species make sense? Why or why not? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy deep, fair science discussions like this, consider subscribing.